They didn't just leave you. They broke something inside you that you thought would never heal again. And now you're sitting in silence, asking God one painful question. Why did you let them hurt me? But what if the real answer isn't about punishment? What if it's about protection, purpose, and something you cannot understand in the moment of pain? Because sometimes, the people who hurt you the most are not accidents in your life. They are lessons you had to survive to become who you were always meant to be. They didn't just leave you. They broke something inside you that you thought would never heal again. And now you're sitting in silence, asking God one painful question. Why did you let them hurt me? But what if the real answer isn't about punishment? What if it's about protection, purpose, and something you cannot understand in the moment of pain? Because sometimes, the people who hurt you the most are not accidents in your life. They are lessons you had to survive to become who you were always meant to be. And when that realization begins to sink in, you start remembering the moments you never expected would end this way. The conversations that once felt safe. The promises that once felt forever. The presence of someone who made you believe they would never become the reason of your tears. You didn't see it coming. You didn't prepare for it. You didn't think someone you trusted with your emotions could turn into the very reason you question your worth. That is the pain you didn't expect. It doesn't arrive like a warning. It arrives like a shock to your entire world, shaking the foundation of everything you believed about love, loyalty, and people. One moment you are laughing with them, planning futures in your mind, attaching your heart without hesitation. And the next moment you are left with silence so heavy that even your thoughts start echoing in confusion. And the hardest part is not just losing them, but losing the version of yourself who believed so deeply in them. You start replaying everything, searching for signs you missed, trying to understand where it all went wrong, as if clarity could somehow heal the damage. But in reality, the pain you didn't expect was never just about them leaving. It was about what broke inside you when they did. The trust you gave freely now feels dangerous to offer again. The love you expressed so easily now feels like something you must protect yourself from. And in that broken space, you begin to realize something uncomfortable yet powerful. Not every person who enters your life is meant to stay, and not every bond you feel is meant to last. Some connections are only designed to reach a certain point, just enough to shape you, shake you, and awaken parts of you that comfort could never reveal. And so even though it hurts deeply, even though it feels unfair, even though your heart still struggles to accept it, this is where your story begins to shift, right in the middle of the pain you never expected. And in the middle of that pain, when everything inside you feels broken and unanswered, there is a truth you can't see in that moment, but will one day understand with clarity that feels almost painful in itself. Because pain has a way of shrinking your vision. It makes you believe that what you lost was everything, when in reality, it was only a small part of a much bigger plan you cannot yet comprehend. You start thinking that the ending was unfair, that the silence was abandonment, that the hurt was meaningless. But what if none of that is actually true? What if the very thing you are crying over is the same thing that was quietly blocking your growth, your peace, and your future without you even realizing it? The truth you can't see in pain is that not everything that feels good is meant for you, and not everything that hurts is meant to destroy you. Sometimes God allows emotional confusion so that He can redirect your heart away from what would have slowly broken you in ways you couldn't recover from. You may only see the loss of a person, but God sees the loss of your future self if you stayed in that same place. And that is why what feels like rejection is often protection in disguise. When someone walks away, your first instinct is to question your worth, but the deeper truth is that their departure often reveals your value more than their presence ever did. Because if you never lost them, you might have stayed blind to how much of yourself you were sacrificing just to keep them. Pain convinces you that you are being punished, but truth slowly teaches you that you are being prepared. Prepared to see people differently, prepared to love yourself more wisely, prepared to stop settling for connections that only drain you while pretending to complete you. And even though you cannot feel it yet, there is a hidden mercy in everything that broke your heart. Not because the hurt was easy, not because the loss didn't matter, but because there is a divine intelligence working behind the scenes of your life that sees what your emotions cannot. And one day, when the storm inside you settles, you will look back and realize that what you once called your deepest pain was actually the beginning of your clearest truth. And when that truth begins to settle inside you, another realization slowly rises from the silence they left behind. They were never meant to stay forever. Not everyone who enters your life carries a permanent role, even though in the moment it feels like they do. Some people arrive like lessons wrapped in emotions, teaching you things about love, trust, boundaries, and self-worth that you could never learn in comfort. At first, you don't see them as temporary. You attach meaning to their presence. You build expectations around their words, and you begin to imagine a future where they are as permanent as the feelings they triggered inside you. But time has a way of revealing what emotion tries to hide. And slowly, the same hands you once trusted begin to let go. The same voice you once depended on starts to fade, and the same presence you once believed was your safe place becomes a memory you struggle to accept. It hurts not because they left, but because you believed they were meant to stay. Yet, in reality, some people are only assigned to your story for a season, not a lifetime. They come to awaken something in you, sometimes love, sometimes pain, sometimes awareness. But their role is not to remain. Their role is to transform you. And when their purpose is complete, life itself begins to separate paths in ways that no amount of holding on can reverse. What feels like abandonment is often alignment, even when it doesn't feel like it in the moment. Because if they stayed beyond their purpose, they wouldn't just stop adding to your life, they would start taking from it. And that is something you cannot always see when you are emotionally attached. You only realize it later, when the noise settles, when the emotions calm, when you finally begin to see yourself again outside of them. And then it becomes clear that their departure was not the destruction of your story, but the continuation of it in a direction you were too afraid to walk alone. They were never meant to stay forever, because forever was never the lesson. The lesson was learning how to let go, how to grow, and how to understand that not everything that touches your heart is meant to live there permanently. And when you begin to accept that some people were never meant to stay forever, another deeper question rises inside you. If they were only temporary, then why did it hurt so much? And this is where the hidden reason behind the hurt begins to reveal itself slowly, not in the moment of pain, but in the reflection that follows it. Because the hurt was never random and it was never meaningless, even though it felt like everything was falling apart without reason. The hidden reason behind the hurt is that sometimes God allows you to experience the full depth of a connection, only so you can later see the truth of it clearly. If they didn't break your trust, you might have continued trusting blindly. If they didn't walk away, you might have stayed attached to something that was slowly draining your peace without you even noticing it. If they didn't disappoint you, you might have kept lowering your standards just to keep someone who was never fully aligned with your value. And so what feels like heartbreak is often revelation in disguise. Because clarity rarely arrives in comfort. It usually arrives in chaos, in confusion, in the moments where you feel like nothing makes sense anymore. The hidden reason behind the hurt is that pain forces you to see what love made you ignore. It strips away illusions, it removes emotional fog, and it shows you people as they truly are, not as you hoped they would be. And even though that realization cuts deeply, it also frees you in ways you don't understand at first. Because once you see clearly, you can never go back to pretending you didn't see. You begin to understand that the version of you who stayed, who tolerated, who ignored red flags was not weak, but unawakened, and the pain becomes the awakening. It teaches you discernment, it teaches you boundaries, and it teaches you the quiet power of choosing yourself even when your heart wants something different. So the hidden reason behind the hurt was never destruction, it was direction. A painful but necessary shift that pulled you away from illusions and pushed you toward truth, even if the journey through that truth broke you open first before it rebuilt you stronger than before. And after you begin to see the hidden reason behind the hurt, something even deeper starts unfolding within you, something you could never access in comfort or ease, and that is the version of you that only pain can build. Because there is a transformation that doesn't happen when life is gentle, when everything goes according to plan, when people stay and emotions feel safe. That version is built in silence, in heartbreak, in the nights where you question everything you believed about love and loyalty. Pain has a strange but powerful way of stripping away everything unnecessary from your life, including illusions, attachments, and even the version of you that depended too much on others for emotional stability. And in that stripping away, something raw and real begins to emerge. You start becoming more aware, more observant, more careful with your emotions. You stop giving access too easily, not because you are bitter, but because you are becoming wise. You start understanding that not everyone deserves the depth of your feelings, and not every connection deserves your full trust. And even though this awareness is born from hurt, it becomes the foundation of your strength. This is the version of you that no longer ignores red flags just to feel loved. This is the version of you that no longer confuses attention with intention or presence with loyalty. This is the version of you that learns how to sit with silence without begging for closure, how to accept endings without chasing explanations, and how to move forward even when your heart is still healing. Pain builds a strength in you that comfort never could, because comfort keeps you the same. But pain forces you to evolve. And in that evolution, you begin to notice that your standards have changed, your boundaries are stronger, and your self-respect is no longer negotiable. You are no longer the same person who once begged someone to stay, because now you understand that anything meant for you will never require you to lose yourself in the process. And even though this transformation came through something that broke you, it is also the reason you will never be broken the same way again. And when you reach that stage where you are no longer the same person who begged to be loved, something even more powerful begins to settle in your heart, a realization that changes the way you see everything that happened. And that is the truth that God didn't break you. He built you. Because what you once called breaking was actually a process of rebuilding, even though it didn't feel like it in the moment. You saw loss, you saw endings, you saw people walking away and leaving emptiness behind, but what you didn't see was the silent work happening within you at the same time. Every tear you cried was shaping your emotional strength. Every betrayal you experienced was sharpening your discernment. Every disappointment was slowly detaching you from illusions that were never meant to last. And in that process, God was not absent, even when it felt like silence was the only response you received. He was removing what you were emotionally attached to, even when it was not aligned with your future. Because sometimes what we cling to is exactly what keeps us from becoming who we are meant to be. And God, in His wisdom, does not just comfort you, He corrects your direction. The pain you went through was not a sign of abandonment, it was a sign of realignment. It was God stepping into your life and quietly separating you from people, situations, and patterns that were shaping you in the wrong direction. And even though that process felt like destruction, it was actually construction happening at a level you couldn't understand at the time. You thought you were falling apart, but in reality, you were being rebuilt from the inside out. Stronger boundaries were being formed, deeper awareness was being developed, and a new version of you was being shaped, one that would no longer tolerate what once broke you. And when you finally begin to see it from this perspective, you realize that nothing was wasted, not even the pain. Because what God builds through breaking is not weakness, but wisdom, not confusion, but clarity, and not a shattered version of you, but a stronger one who now understands that even the hardest seasons were part of a divine process, leading you towards something better than what you lost. And after you begin to understand that God didn't break you, but was quietly building you, you enter a phase that feels completely different from everything before it. A phase where the noise fades, the emotions settle, and you are left alone with something unfamiliar yet deeply transformative: the silence after they leave. Because when people walk away, they don't just take their presence with them, they also leave behind echoes of everything you shared with them, and in the beginning, that silence feels unbearable. You find yourself replaying memories that no longer exist in reality, conversations that will never happen again, and moments that once felt alive but now only exist in your mind. The absence feels louder than their presence ever did, and in that silence, your heart tries to hold on to what your mind is slowly being forced to release. But what you don't realize at first is that this silence is not your punishment, it is your reset. It is the space where God begins to clear your emotional clutter, where the attachment slowly loses its grip, and where your identity starts to return to you without the influence of those who left. In the beginning, you feel lost in it, as if something important has been taken from you. But as time passes, you begin to notice something subtle changing within you. The emotional intensity starts to fade, the confusion begins to settle, and the questions that once consumed you start losing their power. And in that quietness, you begin to hear yourself again, your thoughts, your needs, your values, your strength that was once overshadowed by attachment. The silence after they leave is not empty. It is full of reconstruction, happening at a level you cannot immediately see. It is where healing begins without announcement, where clarity slowly replaces chaos, and where you start becoming comfortable with your own presence again. And one day, without even realizing when it happened, you will notice that the silence no longer feels like loss, but like peace, returning to a place that was once overwhelmed by pain. And when the silence finally begins to feel like peace instead of pain, there comes a moment of deep reflection where everything you went through starts to connect in a way you never understood before. And that is where you begin to see the real reason God let them hurt you. Because in the middle of your pain, it never felt like there was a reason. It only felt like loss, confusion, and emotional collapse. But now you start to realize that what you called destruction was actually direction all along. God never allowed them into your life to complete you. He allowed them to reveal you, to show you parts of yourself you would have never discovered without that experience. The hurt was not random, it was revealing. It exposed where you were too trusting, where you ignored your intuition, where you gave too much of yourself without protection, and where you confused emotional attachment with genuine alignment. And even though it hurt to learn those lessons, it also saved you from staying in patterns that would have cost you far more in the long run. The real reason God let them hurt you was not to punish you, but to prepare you for something you could not have handled in your previous version. Because sometimes, before elevation, there must be separation. Before clarity, there must be confusion. Before strength, there must be breaking. And God used that pain as a tool, not to destroy your heart, but to expand it in wisdom, awareness, and emotional maturity. You may have lost people, but you gained discernment. You may have been broken, but you gained clarity. You may have cried in silence, but you gained strength that no comfort could have ever given you. And now, when you look back, you begin to understand that the hurt was never the end of your story. It was the turning point that redirected your life towards something far better than what you lost, even if you couldn't see it at the time. And when you finally understand the real reason God let them hurt you, something inside you begins to shift in a quiet but powerful way. And that shift leads you into a realization that changes everything you thought about endings, because you start to see that what you once called the end was never truly an end at all. It was simply the beginning of something you were not ready to understand in the moment. Every tear you cried, every night you spent overthinking, every unanswered question that once kept you awake, it all starts to make sense in fragments, like pieces of a picture slowly coming together after the storm has passed. Because what ended in your life was not your value, not your purpose, and not your future, but only a chapter that had fulfilled its role in shaping who you are becoming. And now, as you stand in the space they left behind, you begin to notice something different growing inside you. A strength that does not depend on people, a peace that does not rely on validation, and a clarity that no longer needs explanations from those who walked away. The ending that once broke you is now quietly becoming the foundation of your beginning, because it pushed you into a version of yourself that you would have never met in comfort. And even though you didn't choose the pain, you are now learning how to choose what comes after it: your healing, your growth, your self-respect, and your direction. One day, you will look back not with anger, but with understanding, and you will realize that the very thing you thought destroyed you was the same thing that redirected your entire life towards something better, something stronger, something more aligned with who you were always meant to become. And in that realization, the ending no longer feels like loss, it feels like awakening. So if you are hurting right now, if someone has left you broken, if you are questioning God, remember this: sometimes God lets you break, so He can build you into someone who can never be broken the same way again.